My Lords, I beg leave to ask a question of which I have given private notice. The question is as follows. To ask His Majesty's Government what assessment they have made of the policing of recent marches and demonstrations.
My Lords, the police are operationally independent. It is their decision how they choose to police a protest, and they are accountable for that. The Metropolitan Police used a range of powers to minimise disruption and disorder. Police made 145 arrests on Saturday, most of which were linked to the counter-demonstration. However, the police continue to investigate other offences. The police have the government's full backing to use all the powers at their disposal to ensure the perpetrators face the full force of the law. And as is right, the government will continue to hold the police to account. But I think it's also right that we acknowledge Remembrance Weekend events passed without disruption.
My Lords, freedom to speak and to march and police discretion are all pillars of our Constitution. But I've never before in my lifetime seen mobs marching through the streets alongside some who call for violent jihad and the death of Jews and waving swastika signs. Once the Saturday march was underway, why were the police posing with a child dressed as a terrorist while protesters rampaged threateningly outside a synagogue? Many of us call on the police to apply the law to those who are guilty of offences under Section 5 of the Public Order Act, aggravated by religious and racial hatred, public nuisance, and glorifying terrorism. It's a worldwide problem. Anti-Semitism is on parade. Jews can't fix it on their own. We need people with us. Does the Minister agree that we need a cry of solidarity?
I wholeheartedly agree, and I was very emphatic on that point at the dispatch box last week. We did see vile examples of anti-Semitism by a minority at the Pro-Palestine march. The fears that our Jewish community have experienced over the weekend and the days leading up to it are shocking, and as I said last week, disgusting. There is no place for hate on Britain's streets, and the police have confirmed that investigations are ongoing.
My Lords, as someone who marched with hundreds of thousands of very peaceful protesters last Saturday, I witnessed not one single incitement to hatred to anyone, and it was a march for peace. Until, of course, the EDL came into the scene and we all saw what happened. Will Noble Lord, the Minister, assure all those who marched for peace that they will not be checkered by the way that they're being depicted as marchers who are jihadis, because simply the fact is that they were not.
Well, my Lords, a quick surf of the internet this morning would suggest that the noble Baroness is wrong. I would also suggest that trying to conflate the activities of the violent thugs who tried to invade the cenotaph and those of the marchers, some of whom indeed were peaceful, is also wrong. The fact is 15 officers were injured, 2 of them required hospital treatment at the cenotaph. My best wishes go to those officers. I think the police behaved entirely appropriately in dealing with the violence, but I seriously hope they also deal with those marchers who were doing precisely the things that the noble lady has alleged they were not.
In light of the unplanned departure of the previous Home Secretary and the extraordinary and deeply concerning violent events witnessed on the streets of London this weekend, can the Minister confirm whether the new Home Secretary will use more restrained language to ease tensions on our streets and also refrain from interfering in the operational independence of the Metropolitan Police?
As regards the second part of the question, the previous Home Secretary did not interfere with the operational independence of the Metropolitan Police. As regards the first part of that question, I have not yet spoken to the new Home Secretary, but I wish him very well in his new role.
My noble friend is right. There has been an explosion of anti-Semitism in the capital and across the UK since October the 7th. And these marches are, at the very least, a factor in aggravating that. So if the police, exercising their judgment, feel that there is not sufficient trigger at the moment to say that there is sufficient threat of serious public disorder, which is the current bar, is there not a case for re-examining what the bar is for asking for these marches to be banned, so that the cumulative effect on the Jewish community, on many members of the Jewish community, can properly be taken into account?
Well, the Noble Lord makes a very good point. The Home Secretary does have reserve powers and some legislative tools that do enable intervention and direction, but those powers may only be used in line with statutory tests and public law principles in very exceptional circumstances. The Metropolitan Police have not asked for that sort of intervention. The Noble Lord is quite right. The government has been in regular contact with the police over the use of their powers to manage protests, and where we identify gaps in the legislation, we will seek to address them. And as was widely reported this morning, that is still under review.
My Lords, my Lords,
my Lords, any violence and any threat is to be deplored wherever it comes from. I want to add a word of congratulations to the police, who in very, very difficult circumstances actually, I think, did a superb job. Of course there are going to be groups of people who are pushing the boundaries and indeed acting unacceptably. My Lords, the danger of the media is it gives the impression that the only game in town are the marches and the demos, but many, for example, on these benches, and I guess many other members of this House, have been meeting with leading Israelis and Palestinians in our own local communities, finding there are people who are desperately trying to reach out to others and to think about how we can take this forward. What is His Majesty's government doing at the moment to mobilise some of our leading Israelis and Palestinians to try and enable talks about how we might find a more positive narrative as we go forward?
Well, I think the Right Reverend Prelate makes an extremely good point, and I commend the activities of both him and his colleagues and other faith leaders for trying to find civilised solutions to this problem. In terms of what His Majesty's government is doing to encourage the sorts of interactions that he mentions, I'm afraid I don't know. But I would also argue, and I think it deserves to be mentioned actually, that in terms of proportionality, the organisers of the marches, the pro-Palestinian marches, have a responsibility. As Peter Tatchell, who many of the House will know, was blocked from marching with the pro-Palestinians for carrying a sign that said, "End Israel's occupation, end Hamas's sexist, homophobic, anti-human rights dictatorship." I think that's pretty disgraceful at all, and everybody needs to exercise proportionality in this.
Interest as set out in the register, anti-Semitism is unacceptable in any setting. But does the Minister not agree that arresting people in the middle of a mass protest can result in serious disorder and injury to police officers, as can the police attempting to prevent people who are determined to protest from doing so, as we saw with the right-wing demonstrators on Saturday?
Well, Lords, on this I'm very happy to defer to the Noble Lord's extensive experience of policing protests of this type. It is obviously self-evident that if you wade into a crowd, there is a chance that you're going to inflame tensions. So I think the police's approach, they're operationally independent, of course, and I'm not going to judge what they did, but it would seem to me to make some sense in that context.
My Lords, can I start by thanking the Metropolitan Police, as the Noble Bishop did, and all the officers who were on the streets of London, ensuring that Armistice Day events were not disrupted, facing disgraceful far-right violence and assaults whilst working still to pursue appalling, vile anti-Semitism, as the Noble Baroness has pointed out to us, as well as other hate crimes. But does the Minister agree with me that it would have been helpful in the run-up to these events had we had a Home Secretary who calmed tensions rather than actually used language which actually inflamed some of the protests and policing that we saw? And above all, despite the Noble Lord's points to this House, will the new Home Secretary ensure that never again do we have a situation where a Home Secretary of this country seems to question the operational independence of the police? Isn't it the case that that's one of the fundamental parts of our democracy, that the police police without fear or favour?
Well, I agree with the Noble Lord, it is, and it's, as he knows, governed by a pretty rigorous protocol. I went into the details on that particular protocol last week. I can do it again if anybody wants to hear it. I suspect they don't. The fact is that the previous Home Secretary is no longer in post, so debating what she did or didn't say would seem to me to be moot. As regards the new Home Secretary, as I said, I haven't spoken to him. I don't know when
My Lords, surprise, we're seeing Nazi-level propaganda and incitement to terrorism on the streets of London when some of the organisations behind these marches have had connections with a Hamas leader who lives in the UK. So can I ask the Noble Lord the Minister, what is being done to investigate the links between those organisations and proscribed terrorist groups?
I can't answer that question, but I would certainly hope that the police are investigating.
My Lords, could I revert to the point made by the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of St Albans? It would be a marvellous beginning for the new Home Secretary if he were to call in leaders of the Jewish community who have the admiration and respect of us all, together with those responsible Palestinians who have a legitimate cause for concern at the destruction and the deaths in Gaza. And if he were to do that in moderate language, which I'm sure he would, it would help to ease tension and to bring people together who have a common cause.
Well, I'm very happy to reflect my noble friend's opinions to the new Home Secretary when I do speak to him.
My Lords, my Lords, my Lord, my Lords, my Lords, can I agree with the noble Baroness Deech that the examples she gave are completely unacceptable and should be met with a firm response. And the degree of anti-Semitism in the country at the moment is deeply, deeply shocking, as is the degree of racism and the degree of Islamophobia. And that's something we should commonly confront. But can I urge the government to be very careful about curbing protests and the right to march through London? If you go back to 1936, when anti-fascists confronted Mosley's mob swaggering through Jewish communities, many of the actions of those anti-fascists could have been regarded as disorderly, but they stopped them, and they stopped that anti-Semitism wave. Similarly, many of the actions that I helped organise through the Anti-Nazi League in the late 1970s were similarly saved local Jewish communities and black communities from assault. Be very, very careful about curbing the right to march peacefully.
Well, I entirely agree with the noble lord.
Two of those arrested in Paris for painting anti-Semitic slogans on French synagogues have said to the police, we are told, that they were acting under orders from Russian sources. Is the government looking to see whether there is any element of foreign interference in some of these protests? Because it is, of course, in the Russian interest to stir up disorder in this country, and this is a very easy way to do it.
My Lords, I have absolutely no idea.
One of the saddest pictures that we saw over the weekend was of the two poppy sellers, elderly couple in Victoria Station, being gradually moved and shifted, having to move and be shifted because of large numbers of noisy and loud and very, very angry protesters around them. What annoyed me, and I think vast members of the public, will be the way that the police who were standing there did nothing to help those poppy sellers, but seemed to be more interested in supporting and helping the demonstrators. Did the Commissioner of the Police give an outright order to rank-and-file police that they had to go very, very easy with protesters, but stamp down on anything else that seemed to be out of order?
My Lords, I don't know what direct orders the Metropolitan Police Commissioner gave. As I said earlier, though, the responses to the cenotaph, where violence was obviously being deployed, was swift and, I think, appropriate. Not that it's my call to judge what the police's actions were. That will be for the courts. The fact is, I don't know whether or not he gave those sorts of orders. But what I would say is that I was at Victoria Station by chance on Saturday afternoon, and I have to say I have never felt more uncomfortable in this country because of the tension that was palpable in the air. It was disgraceful.
Lords, having visited Jewish communities across the United Kingdom over the last few weeks, everywhere the message is the same. Jewish people are scared, Jewish families are scared. The Minister agree with me that the increased police presence we've seen in Jewish communities, be it in Leeds, be it in Manchester, be it in London or elsewhere, has been essential in ensuring that people have been kept safe? And can we be certain that increased presence will continue as long as is needed?
Well, I would certainly hope so. The police forces up and down the country have been stepped up their neighbourhood patrols to support local Jewish and indeed Muslim communities, including visiting schools, synagogues and mosques. We have seen a rise in the anti-Semitism that the Noble Lord describes, and that is appalling. So I would certainly hope that the police's response will stay in place as long as it is needed.
The comments now refer to my policing interests in the Register. My Lords, there clearly were images of people on those marches over the weekend doing things which are appalling. What I hope is happening is that the Metropolitan Police and other police forces are using those images to track down the individuals concerned and then to take action against them. No doubt the Noble Lord will be able to confirm that that's the case. But can he also draw attention to the huge march which took place in Paris against anti-Semitism? And does he think it would be appropriate if something similar happened in this country?
Well, the police have said that they're investigating those images, so yes, I think I can confirm to the Noble Lord that that is happening. I would certainly like to see a march against anti-Semitism, and I would join it.